Hey everyone, Sycra here, and I haven't done a speed painting in a while, so I figured I'd do one. And if you're unfamiliar with my process, the reason I'm starting out with scribbles is because I have no idea what I'm going to be drawing or painting. And I sometimes start this way to create a mess, and then I look into that mess and see if I can find something, if a line catches my eye, or I see something that inspires me, some shapes or whatever. It's just like staring into clouds and looking at clouds, but then once you see something in the clouds, then you want to peg that down and then paint that thing out so everyone else can see what you saw. So that's my process. And I honestly don't know if this is going to turn out good or bad. It could be a disaster. But that's okay, and I'm trusting the process, and it's okay, you know, if things don't turn out well, what's the worst that can happen? I just have an ugly picture, but I have some experience under my belt. And I think it's one of the things that it's good for beginners to know that you shouldn't always have to focus on results. Sometimes it's just the process that's important. When I was starting out, I would be very results oriented. I'd have an image in my head of what I want to draw, and I'd try and draw that, and most of the time it looked nothing like what was in my head, and I'd get discouraged, and oftentimes I wouldn't draw for a while because of that. I would be hard on myself, and I'd think I'm terrible, and just it wouldn't be good. And sometimes I'd get lucky and things were okay and they'd go better than expected. Usually I still wouldn't get what I had in my mind, but it would be okay, and then it would just be waiting until the next disappointment before I would not want to draw anymore. And this is really a bad way of going about things, because the way you improve is by drawing a lot and painting a lot. And you're not going to do that if you don't draw or paint because you're too discouraged. And another thing that happens is after you've had disappointment after disappointment, or sometimes when you just have too high expectations of yourself, even before you start drawing, you sort of freeze, you panic, because you're expecting things to be good, but you're not sure you can pull it off. And you're so used to failing in a way that you expect failure, and that paralyzes you. And this is something that's also important, is to realize that failure is good. Failure is what you need. Because when you fail, and then you learn from your failures, you learn from your mistakes, then that's what pushes you forward. Having success after success isn't going to help you, because you won't know why you're having that success. You have nothing to compare it to. Like if you've done something wrong, then you know what's right. But if you constantly do something right, then you have no point of reference, and you might be good, but you're not probably going to be improving as much as someone who makes a lot of mistakes, because making mistakes means you're trying new things, and that's how you improve, right? You got to try new things, you got to experiment. So that's what I'm trying to do here, trying to experiment. I've been practicing materials and trying to understand materials. I've been doing still life every day for, I think it's like 25 days now. And I just spend an hour doing, it's not always still life, sometimes it's another form of practice, but I realized that I was spending a lot of time doing work, and I wasn't spending as much time on my own personal development, and one of the excuses was that I just didn't have time. So what I told myself was that I'm going to set aside an hour every day, and I can afford an hour. Even if I have really tight deadlines, I can afford 1 hour in the day to be doing studies for myself. And it's really been helping. The images, the studies are terrible. I'm not going to show anyone because they are so bad, but it's one of the things where, because I understand I'm not doing this to have a good looking picture, I'm just doing this for mileage. And it's not even that I'm telling myself that I'm doing this to learn or to get better, because even that will put an expectation on myself. And then if I feel like I'm not learning, then maybe it discourages me to do so as much. So instead, I just tell myself, no, you just have to do an hour of this a day. And then the mileage just comes. And there's been many days where I feel like this is going nowhere, and perhaps before I would question myself. And I'd think, maybe I should try some other technique, or maybe this isn't helpful. But a lot of things, they don't come right away. You have to do the paintings over and over and over again. And I mean, 25 days is nothing. Probably I'll try, for at least after a year, I should see some significant results. But already I'm seeing, not so much in the still life itself, which does get easier. But when I do things from imagination, I see that it's easier for me than it previously was, especially when it comes to materials, when it comes to lighting. And this is why working from a still life, and sometimes I'll just hold up my, I'm right-handed, so I'll hold up my left hand and I'll just draw that. And that sucks for an hour because your arm falls asleep and it gets really tired. But because I don't have my left hand to use, I don't use the alt color picker. So what that does is it forces me to, every time I want to pick a color, I have to go to the painter's wheel. And people who ask, how do I get the painter's wheel, on Sycra.net in the resources section, there's 2 links to 2 painter's wheels. One of them is free, the Len White one. You can donate though to Len White and support him that way, and the other one is a colorist wheel, which I believe is $10. But anyway, because I'm limited, I cannot use my left hand. Then it forces me to manually pick the colors. And sometimes what I do when I can use my left hand is I'll just lay down colors on the page and then just sample the colors I already have and maybe adjust them. And that's fine. But it's not training you as much as when you have to pick colors from scratch. The other thing that's good about keeping things to about an hour is that you're working when you have energy. And also, it forces you to, because you have a timeline, if things are going well, then, or even if they're going badly, it's just this thing of, maybe you're 40 minutes into the painting and you realize, like, I only have 20 minutes left, but I have to paint a lot of stuff that I didn't paint. That's going to make you speed up, and that's actually a good thing, because then you have practice, it adds extra pressure on you. So that's good. And why am I doing still lifes as opposed to putting up reference on my computer screen? Well, something magical happens when you draw from life, and that is, I don't know, you can just see the forms differently, you think about them differently. When you see a flat, a two-dimensional reference, be it a drawing or a photo or any other two-dimensional reference, your brain is breaking things down into shapes and lines and color, and you're sort of replicating that. And it's much more difficult to understand what's going on. Whereas when you draw from life, there is that extra component of understanding that comes along with things. You can't match colors, really. You can try, but you don't have a reference that's convenient beside you that you can check things against. So it's more difficult, but at the same time, you're learning more. And this is important as well, because I'm talking about mileage and just painting and just drawing and doing it every day, and that will help you improve. But it's also a matter of doing the right kind of practice. Any kind of drawing is going to help. It's going to help at least train your hand-eye coordination. But some forms of practice are much more effective than others. Drawing from life is one of them. Now, by contrast, life drawing is a different animal, I've found, because life drawing does help, and it helps make gestures easier and things, but it's one of these things that you have to do often. If you take a break from life drawing for too long and then you go back to it, you're gonna be bad. It's a little bit scary how fast you can lose the ability that you once had, your proficiency in life drawing. And for me, I used to do, well, I would do life drawing where I go to a session and I see a live model in front of me, and then I would do online life drawing on things like Pose Maniacs, where you're just working off a 2D model, and now I'd use Pixel Lovely. And then I would do that for 3 hours, and then I'd do like 2 hours of anatomy study. I'd open up my Bridgman book and do anatomy study from that. But although my hand was improving, my hand-eye coordination, I wasn't remembering all the anatomy. It wasn't until I started drawing my own characters and then overlaying anatomy on top of those drawings and using the books as reference and using medical illustrations as reference, or even my own body by moving, twisting the arm or flexing to see, what muscle does what and where does that go, and comparing that and cross-referencing things that I felt my anatomy actually started to improve. Another thing you could do is just look at how other artists have simplified things. Personally, I like to look at Google and use medical illustrations, and the way you do that is just Google search the name of the muscle. So, for instance, coraco or brachialis, or sternocleidomastoid, or pectoralis, or whatever, and then you'll get images that show the insertion, where the muscle goes. You'll get many images side by side, so then you can compare. Sometimes working from one book alone is not good. I've noticed many times, especially in anatomy, that different books have different terminology sometimes for the same muscles, and sometimes I've seen books that just flat out get it wrong. And I'm sure even myself, I've probably gotten things wrong just because I've worked off one book. But when you have a few images and you see like 9 out of 10 of the images are calling it one thing, and then 1 out of 10 is calling it the other thing, then probably go with the 9 out of 10 label for that muscle. So going back to what I was talking about before about not having expectations on yourself, fear is a big component to art, especially to the beginner. And getting over this fear is really important, and I do feel like overcoming this desire to have a good result, to have a pretty picture by the end of the drawing session, it's very important to get over that. Simply because you will improve, and that will come in time, but you need mileage above all else. And having this idea that no, not only do I have to learn, not only do I have to experiment, but at the end of this, I need a good looking image. To me, it's just extra stuff you don't need. You don't need to be dealing with that. That gets in the way. One of the nice things about going to let's say I'm going to university and I want to be a doctor, and I know that, okay, I'm gonna be taking 4 years, and I'll get my bachelor's, and then another 2 years for my master's maybe, and then I'll do med school or whatever. Maybe it'll take another 7 years. But it's this idea of, I know that I just have to show up and do well, and sort of you're trusting the process that by the end of this journey, I'm going to be a doctor, and there's going to be jobs and everything waiting for me. But for art, it's not that way, because culturally, we don't think about art in the same way. At least for me, coming from a Western culture, the way art is thought of mostly by most people is it's talent related, you know. We're really focusing on, well, if you have talent, or you learned from a young age, or those two together, that you took lessons and you were talented, then that's how you get good. But we don't really think of other things that way. You don't say to someone aspiring to be a doctor, well, you know, when you were 5 years old, were you talented at this? Did you have a good bedside manner? Did your little sister get sick one time and you knew just what medicine to give her, and hey, it worked, and you were very good? And then someone could have seen that and said, my child is talented at taking care of people. He just has a natural ability to know what's wrong, and maybe he'd be a good doctor. Let's enroll him in doctor school. And then you have this little kid going to doctor school, and then I guess you'd have a whole bunch of Doogie Housers. But that's not the way it's thought of. But in a way, that's how art is thought of. You know, the kid has to display talent first, and then if they're very good, that will help. And of course it helps when you take a kid who has natural talent in the beginning. And by that, I just mean concepts come easier to this person than they might to another person. Of course, if you take that person, then you give them education, they're only going to get better, of course. But if you took someone who didn't have this so-called talent and gave them education, they too would improve. And if they're not, then it might be a problem with the education and not really the person, right? And this other thing about talent is, if we do accept that there is talent, and talent is just something that makes things easier for certain people, well, then there are people who are talented in the beginning, in the early stages of the process, but they're not so talented later on in the middle and the later stages. And other people, you know, their talent kicks in that middle or later stage. So the best way to think about talent is to not bother thinking about it, because it doesn't matter. In the end, it's the mileage that counts. So one thing I used to really enjoy was video games, especially RPGs, because it would be something where I could kill a monster, gain experience, and then know for sure that this experience is going towards me leveling up to the next level. I will become stronger. It didn't feel like a waste. Whereas when I was starting out with art, I would do drawings, but sometimes it felt like a waste. That, what is this, you know? Is this going to help me? Or am I just spinning my wheels? Am I just thinking I might be good, but maybe I never will? And I had plenty of people who told me that, you know, maybe you're not that good. Maybe you will never be that good. And some of the people who were closest to me in life were the ones who didn't believe in me. And that was always a struggle. But I guess I just trusted the process a bit, because I had to. For me, I had no other options. And sometimes I see that people with options, for instance, people who say, you know, I think I like doing art. Maybe I'll try and be an artist, but just to be safe, I'm going to go into engineering. just to be safe, or maybe their parents have encouraged them. And then they try art and they get to this wall where it's like they realize, oh, I'm not very good. Well, thank God I'm still doing the engineering, because otherwise I would have found out too late if I only did art that I wasn't very good, and then I'd have nothing. So they quit and they go into engineering. Whereas the person who has no options, all they can do is art. That's the only option they have. Then they hit that wall, and it says, "Hey, you can't do art. This might not be for you. You just are not good enough." And then they have to keep hitting that wall, and you hit it, and you hit it, and you hit it, and eventually you get a crack. And then you hit it some more, and eventually the whole wall collapses, and you walk through that, and you are stronger for it. And then the next wall comes up, and same thing. You got to knock it down. But yeah, that idea, why I mentioned video games, is just how nice it is to get that instant gratification and to have that reinforcement that, hey, you're doing the right thing. And with art, you just have to remember it's the same. Do the drawings. Don't worry about the result. Don't worry if it sucks. Don't worry if it doesn't. I would encourage you not to show anyone, just because it takes away that one extra piece of baggage of, I don't have to tie my self-esteem to this because no one's going to see it. I know it takes mileage to get good. I'm putting in the mileage. So that's all you have to do. And, getting a tablet, it's not going to help you. It's not going to be this quick thing where sometimes people who want results so badly think, well, I can't get it with pencil and I can't get it with pen. Maybe if I buy a tablet, I'm going to get the results I want. And not really. That's not what's going to help you in the end. I mean, drawing is so essential. It might be easier for you to see shapes, and maybe the tablet does help for that. A lot of what I've done in this speed painting has been designed for a tablet. I mean, I could do this process with oil paintings, but it wouldn't be as easy. I am using a lot of Photoshop's abilities because I know what they do. So yeah, this would be a painting that would have to be done in a way digitally. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I can't draw on paper or paint traditionally. And the things I'm using are, all the information is because I've been drawing and because I've been doing studies and things. So that's why you're able to do this stuff. It's sort of like magic, where you see a magic trick and you just have to understand that it's a trick. It's not really magic. These people have practiced so hard until it seems like magic, until they make it look easy, but it's not easy. It just takes a lot of work. And once you understand that, on one hand, perhaps it demystifies the whole thing, because you understand that, oh, okay, it's not like there's magical people. A lot of times I hear this thing about, well, God has blessed you with talent or something like that. You are gifted. And, I don't know, I feel that sort of is doing a disservice to what is really going on, which is just hours and hours and hours and days and years of work. Because that's what it really is. And maybe it's not as magical when you think of it that way, but at the same time, it's awesome to know that, hey, anyone can get this if they just put in the work. And it might not come easy to them, but that just means you've got to put in more work. So anyway, that's my talk on that, and I hope you got something out of it, and thanks for watching.